welcome Dr. Alyshia Galvez, who is your first presenter. And Dr. Galvez is very, very well published. I know her because she is well published, but I also know her because she is such a strong advocate for students, and she has helped a lot of our students publish, but also her personal interest in advocacy and activism and how involved she is in the community. I think this is a brand new workshop. I'm pretty sure that this is something you do anyway in the way you teach, but they're putting together a brand new workshop, Writing for Liberation, that is going to be offered. It's so exciting. And so I think you're very privileged to be the first ones to hear this from her and to meet someone. And I also want to thank you so much, Dr. Galvez, because I know you must be super busy and it's Friday morning, and we appreciate your time with us. So thank you.
Thank you, Suzette. Thank you, Kakita, for organizing this, and for all of you for being here. It's in this time that we're living in, to be, still thinking about things like our writing and our work. It can be a little respite, but it's also really hard to carve out the time and to balance all of the things that we all have so many anxieties about and responsibilities for, more than in normal busy times. So I appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate the invitation. This workshop really emerged from thinking that I've been doing for quite a while, that really, I think, became more acute or more urgent in my mind this summer after the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Really thinking through what are we doing? What exactly are we doing here? And how do we make ourselves vessels for the kind of world that we want to see? And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. It's really, I put it together really as a conversation. So I want to encourage you. I know some of you may be at your job or have other reasons for having your camera off, but if it's at all possible, it's a lot more interactive if we can see and hear each other. And I don't mind your mic being on at all times. I love it when I hear little sounds. If you laugh or, sneeze or snort and disbelief or disgust at something that I'm saying, I want to hear it. So, unless you've got like a super noisy dog. I have a dog, but she's going to make noise and we'll live with it. If you have a super noisy baby or something that, it's just going to be too much, you can keep your mic muted, but otherwise I just encourage you to keep everything on unmuted. And we'll get into it. I'm going to share my screen because I have some images and things to share. Oh, Suzette, could you make me co-host?
Jen, do you have it? Okay, Jen.
Oh, yep, I got it. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Oops. Go back to the beginning. 1 second. Okay, there we go. So let's get started. So if you are interested in these slides, there's some links in the slides and some information. So if you want them for yourself, maybe someone can grab this URL and put it in the chat, or I can. Let's see, whoops. Can someone do that for me?
I'll do it.
Okay, great. And I love that whoever made the flyer put the picture of the notebook with the pen, and so please, that inspired me. Please grab, if you don't have it handy, take a second to grab a pen and paper, just so we can do some thought processes on paper. I think there are still some things that our brain likes to do with our body as opposed to just, the screen and the electronics. Let me know, raise your hand if you need a little more time. If you're ready, actually, let's do it the other way, because if you're here, you might be ready. If you're ready, raise your hand if you have a pen and paper. Great. Good, good. So it looks like a lot of people are. So we'll move on. Okay, so, these hashtags, this was a bad week, let's face it. you know, the news has been terrible and heartbreaking. And we've had a summer in which we've seen, you know, if we follow social media, if we follow the media just in the world, in our communities, we've seen so many movements, so much activism, such a cry for justice happening, you know, all around our country and really all around the world. Some of these images are from Latin America. I'm a professor of Latin American and Latino studies, and I'm an anthropologist. So some of these are images from Brazil. So we've all been exposed to this, and I think sometimes it can be hard for us to figure out what is the relationship between what's happening, how we react to it, and what we feel about it, and what we are doing in our work. And I think sometimes our academic work or any work that we do can seem like it somehow has to be separate. Sometimes that's for self-protection. Sometimes we put up a firewall because we think that somehow that those two worlds can't come together. And so what I want us to start thinking about is what matters to us. Why do we do what we do? What is it that we're doing here? And so before we can do any writing or any talking about formatting or citation style, which a lot of you mentioned in the chat, we really have to have a sense of purpose about what it is that we're doing and why we're doing it. And sometimes it can be a very long story, right? I was talking to a student yesterday who works on a certain kind of protein and the relationship between cancer and chemotherapy and that particular protein. I'm sure when they're in the lab, you know, working with a microscope, it can be easy to sometimes forget why cancer, why is this thing, you know, what I'm passionate about when you're thinking about the protein and the equipment and the lab work. But there's a reason that person is studying cancer, a personal reason why that's their passion in life. And so sometimes I find we can forget, we ourselves can forget what our own reason is, and let alone, you know, when we go to communicate it to someone else. We don't always have to communicate it, right? Not everyone needs to know why we're doing what we're doing, but we should know for sure for ourselves. So let's just take 5 minutes to brainstorm. Why do you do what you do? And this can be as specific as why are you in the program that you're in at Lehman, why this degree, but also connecting it to the deep thoughts of what is your life's purpose, right? So just privately for yourself, I'm not going to force you to share it, so don't self-edit. Let's think about this, and on your pen and paper, just jot down anything that comes to mind. Don't get caught up in making it perfect. Don't self-edit. We'll share optionally in about 5 minutes. So I'll come back. I'll be here, but you can, if you feel more comfortable to have a little privacy, you can mute for a minute, mute your camera, mute your mic, take 5 minutes, and then I'll come back to you and we'll talk about it. Okay, so let's start coming back together. I'm going to stop sharing so we can see each other for a few minutes. What was that experience like? Do you want to type one word in the chat about what it felt like to do that? Nice. Good. Really nice. So it sounds like a lot of people had a positive experience. Janina acknowledged that it can be challenging. I want to acknowledge that for me, especially when I first started doing this, which was pretty recently, I was mad at myself because I thought, you get up every day and do this thing and you can't even write down what it is that you do or why you do it. Did anyone have that experience of having a hard time putting it into words? Yeah. Anyone want to share verbally what it was like?
I could go ahead.
Good.
For me, because I'm working from home today, and my son is also home, and he has school, so I'm trying to think of all the different things. I know he's a major part of why I do what I do, but I was trying to think deeper, like what is my driving force?
Mm.
And that was a bit challenging because I'm like, okay, it's not that simple. It's just not just one person. So I was trying to really analyze. And as you said, I did get a little bit frustrated because I'm like, okay, why am I doing this? Why do I get up every day and I'm doing so much? But why?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was what it felt like.
Thank you for sharing that. So much motivation, and then it can be hard for us to kind of put our fingers on what is it? What is the thing that's driving me, that's pushing me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Sure. For me, I thought it was constructive because I think it changes. You know, I don't think it's like concrete in that way, because I think, although I would like to think that this is like one thing, I do this for one reason, there's so many reasons, and it's influenced by behaviors, emotions, experience. So I think in that way, it gave me more to think about and maybe have less clarity in a clarifying way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Yeah,
I like that you said that.
It can change. Go ahead, Joseph.
I like that she said that because our why is always changing. I know on my behalf, for the last 10 years, I've been doing things for one reason, and now I'm realigning with a different reason. And it can be very motivational once you identify and commit to it. But it's also like, it's a duality. There's like growing pains, you know. How do I realign my focus to meet this new direction I want to go in? And it's almost a bit of self-sacrifice. Like, I devoted X amount of time of my life focused on this one direction, and now I have to reinvent myself. But it's a beautiful process, because I believe that you don't let go of anything from your past. You always carry it with you, and it always comes around full circle.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate you giving us this exercise. It's great to realign ourselves or stay aligned. I'm trying to keep it general without getting into my why, because mine is very deep, but it's definitely impactful in everything we do. I'll end it with one statement. They say that if you don't do something, if you don't do what you do for something bigger than yourself, then you will eventually get stopped by something bigger than yourself. So you have to have a bigger reason than just yourself. It's easy to procrastinate for ourselves, don't you think? But when you have that child or that family member that needs you, you know, you have to keep going.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there was so much in what you said, but one of the things that resonated for me especially was this idea of growing pains. It can be physically painful, certainly emotionally painful to go through these kind of chrysalis metamorphosis moments where we're shifting. And, you know, being in a degree program is certainly a kind of a chrysalis moment where you're transforming, you know, aspects of your life into something else. And it's not easy. It's not easy for butterflies when they come out of the cocoon. It looks really painful and uncomfortable. And it's not easy for us either. So.
Absolutely. And not to sound like a masochist, but it's a good pain, you know? And there's like a discipline that we develop through it.
For sure. Thank you. Khadija, I think you had your hand raised.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So yes, but for me, it wasn't painful. And because I felt I was not being watched, I was not, there was no limit, there was no guide. I felt not free. I didn't feel pressured. So I was like, well, this is what I do. I enjoy doing it. So it was easy for me to put what I enjoy into paper. And so it even made me feel a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing too. And I think someone mentioned, Maria, I think mentioned it's easy to lose sight in the day-to-day monotony. And we always have a to-do list. I think we all have, you know, more things on our to-do list than we can possibly accomplish in a day or a week or a year. And so, you know, we kind of constantly have this, what's next, what's next? And to take those 5 minutes and stop and think about what is it that I'm doing and why can be a luxury as well, a really necessary luxury. So thank you all for indulging me by doing that. I'm going to come back to some of the slides. So, you know, thinking about that, I'd like you to just take a moment for yourself to think through, you know, sorry, we're going to have a couple more. Yeah. Okay. So, you know, thinking through how does your life as a student, how do your activities as a student relate to what you just wrote down, right? So you wrote down your purpose, why it is that you do what you do. Is that in sync with what you're reading and writing? We'll be specific, what you're reading and writing on a day-to-day basis. Is your day-to-day activity in sync with what matters to you? And if it's not, why not? Right? Is it because you're in a phase of your graduate program where, you know, you're being, you know, it feels like someone's bringing, you know, a dump truck and unloading, you know, an entire discipline's worth of materials on you all the time and it's overwhelming? Is it because, you know, the program that you're doing is very technical? There could be a lot of reasons why you're motivated to do the program, but it's not actually completely in sync with what matters to you most. And so what I'd like are ways, strategies, and tactics for syncing everything up, for making greater coherence. For me, one of the reasons I'm giving this workshop is because I, you know, came to a point in my academic practice where I felt like I'd lost a little bit of that connection between why I do what I do and what my day-to-day looked like. And so I'm in a continual effort to sync up why I do what I do with how I actually spend my time, because how we spend our time is a reflection, whether we like it or not, of what matters to us. And if what matters to us is not actually how we spend our time, then there's an issue there. And that issue can lead to burnout. It can lead to all kinds of other problems. So what if what we read and what we write in the day-to-day were synced up? And so we're going to try doing that now. So what I'd like us to do is just for a moment brainstorm, you know, kind of what aspects or what, you know, moments you feel. Maybe just we'll take like 30 seconds just to jot down for yourself what is a moment in the last, let's just say since the semester began, where you felt that buzz when you feel like everything is kind of coming together? Just take 30 seconds and write down what that moment was for you. Okay, so when you're ready, we'll come back. Does anyone want to share a moment for you that was particularly where you felt you got a glimpse of what happens when it all comes together?
I'll share.
Right.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Lisa.
The first day of class this semester, so was that moment for me, because as the professors were giving their introduction on the classes, like what we're gonna, like what's expected to come, it was a realization for me, like, yes, finally I'm where I'm supposed to be. This is what I want to learn. And prior to this, like I went through, I want to say like 2 other master degree programs that just was not it for me. Like I was so bored, and I was like, my mind was like going all over the place while teachers were speaking, and I'm here now and I'm like, yes. So I felt excited, and it was like I was in alignment with where I want to be right now. So yeah.
Sounds amazing. That's great. Does anyone want to share a moment that they experienced?
I would say the first day of class for me also. I mean, it took me about 13 years to realize what I wanted to master in.
Oh.
And like I said, in the first day of school classes, somebody directed to me to this program. So when I sat in the first day and heard all the professors and heard everyone in the class talking, I was like, yes, this is it.
Yeah.
Like I'm more enlightened and motivated because I finally found something that synced with everything else that I'm doing.
That's fabulous. How wonderful. Anyone else?
I think for me, it was random. I was just sitting at the computer doing an assignment, and I was like, oh my God, I'm in graduate school. And I said to my mom, oh my God, I'm in graduate school. And she's like, yeah, you're in graduate school.
Yeah.
And there was that moment for me, because I never really planned on going this far with my education. So just seeing I think at that moment it kind of clicked, like, yeah, it's coming together.
I love that. I love that. That's really wonderful. And I just want to acknowledge that I know from teaching undergrads for many years now, that in college, a lot of times students have had that love, that spark, unfortunately worn away or dulled by their educational experiences. And the way that I hear you all talking, it sounds to me like when my kids went to kindergarten the first time and everything was so exciting and interesting, and to have that, you know, to whatever your life experience was. I just had a meeting yesterday with a master's student who was talking about how he dropped out of high school in 10th grade, and it took him 10 years to come back to school. And he had been told horrible things in 10th grade, that he wasn't going to make it, that he wasn't a strong learner. And so to have whatever our trajectory was, hopefully most of us didn't have that kind of a trajectory. But whatever it was that you know brought us through not everything is not everything is supportive or nurturing in the educational system. And so to have that moment of rebirth and attachment to your learning that you get to have in grad school, where you picked the program, you're picking the classes, you know, the empowerment that comes from having that clarity of purpose that you all have right now, is so wonderful. And I just want to, like, you know, snapshot it, capture it, and acknowledge it, because it's really beautiful. And I wish everyone had that, because sometimes in college, a lot of students are like, I'm going through the motions, I'm taking the classes they tell me to take, doing the homework they tell me to do. And in grad school, you get that moment where you're picking it, you're choosing it. And so it's really just so wonderful. So let's keep that, you know, and hold on to that in our day-to-day experience. And what I want to, you know, have us think about is how we, you know, again, sync up what it is that we're doing. And one of the things I want to touch on is what happens when, you know, we are handed a lot of information by our professors. You know, we're given this syllabus, we're given this long list of, you know, canonical texts, whatever our discipline is, whatever our field of study is, that we're supposed to, you know, kind of commit to memory, know who the greats are in our field of study. And then we come to realize that they don't, you know, inspire us, or the things that we're reading don't actually, you know, fill out our sense of purpose, or connect to our sense of purpose, fuel it in a way, sometimes in a negative way. Like, I know one thing, I'm not going to write like this person, or I'm not going to do this kind of research. You know, sometimes it's, you know, we position ourselves in grad school, cultivates that kind of critical, you know, response to things. But we don't just need to have a critical response. You know, that can be kind of, it can be, give us spurts of energy, but it doesn't give us the kind of energy that we need to do the marathon of our thesis writing, etc. So what I want to think about is, how do we identify the people who think outside the box in our discipline? So if there is a disconnect between what we're reading and writing on a day-to-day basis, it might be because the people that we've been assigned to read or told are important in our field are not actually, you know, the thinkers that are thinking like we're thinking right now, that are not thinking about how to change the world with their practices. And for whatever reason, and we're going to talk about those reasons in a few minutes, their ideas have been elevated and put on a pedestal as being important to the discipline, but they're not actually the ones kind of, you know, pushing these conversations. So whatever discipline it is, every discipline is having its moment, its Me Too moment, its Black Lives Matter moment, where they're looking around and saying, you know, what, you know, who's here, you know, who's in this discipline, who's being published, who's not being published, who isn't here, who is not represented in the professor pool, etc. So how do you identify, you know, people who are thinking outside of the box in your field of study? And so one thing I want to do is just encourage you to, one way to sync up our lives is to not have our, you know, social media practices be separate from our academic practices. It's increasingly not only acceptable, but really powerful to use social media as a tool, as a scholar, as, you know, to have an intellectual, you know, attachment and relationship to social media. So I just want to show you, for example, just momentarily, let's see, I think I have to stop sharing and share differently. Okay, so I just want to show you, it's gets so hard to move things around on the screen when everything is open. Okay, so for example, on Twitter, I follow this scholar, Jonathan Rosa. If any of you are in education, if you have an interest in language, he's one of the, you know, up and coming leading scholars. He just got tenure at Stanford. He's Puerto Rican. He wrote a book called Looking Like a Language, Sounding Like a Race. He did research in a Chicago high school. he's an example of hashtag academic Twitter, of someone who gets into really nerdy debates on Twitter about linguistic anthropology. So if you are interested in a field of study related to linguistic anthropology, you can learn a lot from Jonathan Rosa's tweets. So I know there's people here representing lots of different disciplines and fields of study, but identify for yourself who's the Jonathan Rosa in your field. You know, Black Twitter, there's a whole Black academic Twitter universe. You know, Tressie McMillan Cotton, I think, is the queen of that universe, and she's an amazing tweeter. And she's constantly tweeting about higher ed, about her research. She also tweets about home decor and food and, you know, weird interactions at the supermarket. I mean, she tweets about everything, but look for those thinkers in your field who are using Twitter as space for scholarly discourse, especially in this moment when we're all working from home. This is the substitute for the, you know, the cafeteria, the coffee shop, the bar across the street from the university, where people have these kinds of conversations in pre-pandemic times. Also, I want to, you know, encourage you to look for the blogs. Academic publishing is very slow. It's very protracted. It takes a long time. So sometimes when academics have an idea that they want to get out into the world, they'll put it on their blog. And maybe 3 years later, an academic peer-reviewed journal article will come out on the same subject, but they're working out their ideas on their blog. So, you know, Google your, you know, the people you read who do resonate with your thinking, and start to follow them so that you can see, you know, all of the different ways that they write. And when you're trying to strengthen your writing practice, it can be very handy to look at all of the different voices that one person, one scholar might use, how they might tweet in one way, write a blog post in another way, and then write these very, you know, serious sounding academic journal articles, right? And to have that, you know, code switching capacity between the different genres of writing is, you know, that's like pro level kind of stuff, right? Like to not only, you know, feel confident in your writing, but to know which tone and vocabulary and manner to engage in all of these different genres. Interdisciplinary spaces, you know, so there are fields of study that, you know, I don't know, I'm thinking about, for example, there's a scholar who's a master's, she just graduated with her master's from Michigan State, Vanessa Garcia Polanco. She's a Dominican woman who works in farming and agriculture, but she's really interested at the intersection of race and racism and food justice and farming. So look for people who kind of have those like cross-cutting, you know, they bring in different kinds of research. I would really encourage you to follow Vanessa Garcia Polanco. She does a beautiful job on Twitter of finding research, amplifying research, whatever she finds, she tweets, she puts it on Facebook, she creates bibliographies. You know, she's a really active, engaged young scholar with a very public-facing practice. And I've seen how that's made her an incredibly successful graduate student. Her thesis, I mean, I can't even tell you how many, you know, kind of famous academics, you know, congratulated her when she finished her master's thesis, because she developed a relationship on Twitter, on Facebook, with a lot of scholars in her field, just by reaching out and saying, hey, I'm, you know, curious about what you're working on next. Can we have a coffee, virtual coffee? You know, can you share this article with me? Can I share my article with you? You know, that kind of very, you know, informal kind of exchange. And now she's got such a team of backers. So she's going to have success in whatever, you know, she does. So I think that's a really wonderful way to kind of establish your own profile and to establish who you are, because people like Jonathan Rosa and Vanessa Garcia Polanco also use their platforms to critique when academia doesn't do things properly, right? When things happen in their own institutions that they disagree with, they have another whole arena by which they can kind of express the way that they think things should actually work. I'm taking longer than I thought, and so I don't want to run out of time for all the other stuff. But just a couple of recommendations. The Stacks podcast is a nice, nerdy bookworm podcast. Imagine Otherwise is one of my favorite podcasts. They interview, scholars who are working at the intersection of, I can't even sum it up for you. It's just so interesting. She finds scholars who are working at lots of really interesting cross-cutting disciplinary spaces, and she gets them to talk about their research and their personal life. So what I just did with you is what she does on the podcast. So I would encourage you to do that, to listen to that. Now, when we're thinking about who we're reading and what we're writing, it's really important to think about how do we know what to read, right? So we obviously know what we're given on a syllabus, but then the time comes when you have your research project and you have to go and do a search and figure out, what your literature review is going to look like. Who are the people who have, published in this field? Who are the people you're supposed to be reading? And what I want to do is basically let you in on a little secret, which is that the search engines that feed us resources in the databases, the scholarly databases, when you go to Lehman Library scholarly databases, or you go to scholar.google, it's not that different from when you go to Amazon to buy a pair of shoes. Both of those things, search engines, are driven by an algorithm. And what do you think the algorithm, how do you think the algorithm works when, when I say it's the same for shoes as it is for academic articles? What do I mean by that? Does anyone know?
They start to tailor what you see to what you search.
Yeah. So what happens when you go and you're having a look at a pair of shoes on a web page? What happens the rest of the day and for 3 weeks?
You get advertisements everywhere for the same shoe, if not things that are similar from the same store.
Yeah. So there's little robots in your computer who are saying, oh, he wants to buy a pair of shoes. He seems to be interested in this kind of pair of shoes. So we're going to give him a whole bunch more of those similar looking shoes until he buys them. And even if he buys them, we're not going to know. The robots don't know you bought it. And so they still try to sell you more shoes even after you bought the shoes, right? And they chase you around everywhere you go on the internet. Even if you go to a newspaper, all of a sudden you're reading a newspaper article, and in the ad box you get the same shoes kind of haunting you, right? Same thing happens, unfortunately, because when we go to scholar.google, and I'm going to do that right now, when we go to scholar.google, anyone want to think of throw out your one of your research terms, keywords?
Corporal punishment.
Corporal punishment. So we get a bunch of articles, and I find Scholar Google just super quick and easy. And I hope you know this, that when you click on the little quotation mark, it gives you all the different citations and the citation styles. So you can just copy and paste or send to RefWorks, whatever comes up. So it's very easy to make a bibliography this way. But I want to warn you that you can't allow you're the boss of the search engine, not the other way around. So when you do a search, it's going to feed you, just like the pair of shoes, it's going to feed you the shoes that everybody else has been looking at. This is going to feed you the articles that everybody else has been looking at. So if you notice right here, it says cited by, the first thing that comes up has been cited by almost 3,000 people. And then as we go down, we see 371, 267, 220. So it seems that Google Scholar is feeding us things in order of popularity. Now, there are good scholarly reasons why some professors may want you to pick this top article and put it on your bibliography? What are some reasons why some professors will say, there's your source, get that one? Why would that be a good idea, a safe bet for a lot of professors?
Probably because the it has that org. I'm not sure. It looks more reliable.
Yeah. So our professors our whole life have told us, you know, find reliable sources. And if something's been cited 3,000 times, then it must be canonical, right? It must be important. Now, that's probably, to a certain extent, safe, right? And a good choice, right? To pick, and there are reasons why I don't know this field at all, but maybe Gershoff is a leading scholar in the field. Maybe this is a leading article in the field. And so if you're doing a degree program in which this subject is relevant and you don't know Gershoff, then you might be in trouble, right? Now, maybe you have to deal with Gershoff, but I don't know Gershoff. I don't want to speak ill of somebody I don't know, but maybe he's not that great. Maybe he thinks corporal punishment is fantastic and he's really out of touch with all of the new thinking about child-centered, non-punitive ways of, you know, developing restorative justice in the classroom or something. I'm riffing off the top of my head, but maybe Gershoff is a representative of old school thinking, and that's not who you are. That's not why you want to get into this field and study this. You want to think about this thing in a fresh, different way. If you're using Scholar Google, it's feeding you reliable academic sources. Everything here is an academic source. So that's, you know, check that box on your checklist of where you're supposed to go for resources. But it's just feeding you, it's reinforcing what other people besides you have already decided is the key text in this field. And you're trying to think outside the box. You're trying to think in a fresh, new way. So if you have developed your relationship on Twitter with your scholarly field, then you're going to have a better sense of who are the up and coming scholars in my field who are contesting Gershoff, who are revising Gershoff, who are giving Gershoff a run for his money, and really rethinking this field in a new way. So you will not go to Gershoff perhaps, or stay at Gershoff, but you're going to go down that list and you're going to look for those scholars who maybe are at less, well, I don't know where Gershoff is, but maybe Gershoff is at a very well-funded university, and Gershoff has had all of the advantages and all the, you know, things that have enabled Gershoff to publish more, to get more funding, right? None of that means that Gershoff is the smartest or the best at what he's doing. It just means that the same way that the pair of shoes might not be the best pair of shoes in the world, but more eyeballs have looked at it, and so the search engine tells you, here are the shoes you want. Gershoff is being handed to you as received wisdom, right? And we want to hack that algorithm and say, I want to decide who I'm going to listen to, who I'm going to read, and who I'm going to write with, and who my canon is going to be. Because a canon is essentially very similar. If you think about, you know, kind of when you study Greek gods, you know, you have these images of like all the god, you know, like the person and then all the gods kind of lined up behind them. You know, I think the pantheon, right? Who is your pantheon of thinkers who are your models? Not who somebody else told you are the leading scholars in your field, but who do you believe is in sync with your way of thinking, challenging you to come up with new ideas and become a leader in your field for yourself. So be ready to argue, be nerdy, you know, get in there on academic Twitter and look up words that people are bandying around, you know, get that, you know, kind of nerd power where you're ready to use your social media in that way. I'm going to skip this because it's going to take me too much time to the Joshua Schreier. But basically, he gave a lecture at Lehman in which he showed that, you know, who publishes is not necessarily who's doing the best science. It's a self-reinforcing thing, and it's a social thing, right? So if we think about biases in the world, right, we know that people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, women are less likely to have the tenured professorships, less likely to have, you know, the elite grant opportunities. And so it creates a vicious cycle in which those who are cited the most are often those who are most privileged in every sense, right? In the academic sense, but also in the sense we use that word to refer to society. So Chanda Prescott Weinstein is another person I encourage you to follow on Twitter. She wrote a beautiful article about how in physics, the absence of Black women physicists is bad for physics. It's not just bad for the Black women who want to be physicists, but it's bad for physics because the science isn't as good. If you have people who are not bringing their ideas to the table, then the table is impoverished, right? The world of physics is missing something if not everybody is at the table. So she's a great example of someone who really kind of describes this in a very scholarly way, and you can read her academic articles on the subject, but she's also, this Making Black Women Scientists is an academic article that she published in a journal, but Diversity is a Dangerous Setup is a blog post, and then she does Twitter. So if you want to see what I'm talking about in terms of all these different domains of writing, that's a great way to do it. There's also a book published by NYU, Algorithms of Oppression, which kind of gets into the mechanics, the technology and science of the algorithms and why search engines replicate, you know, racism, basically, reinforce stereotypes, etc. And then this is a great book about decolonizing the university and how to really kind of think about undoing the machine of oppression that that the university is part of, even, you know, universities that are much more progressive and diverse like ours. And then Feminist Killjoys by Sarah Ahmed. She's another author, scholar who writes about these issues. And so this is from her blog, the feministkilljoys.com blog. And she has this image, and it's almost a poem, but she has this image of a path. And if you think about, you know, if there's just like a lawn or a hill or a meadow, the more people who walk, you know, between point A and point B, they're going to wear the grass away, right? So one person walking across a hill is not going to wear the grass away, but if you do it every day, and a lot of people do it every day, it starts to wear away the grass, and then you see a path. That's essentially how algorithms work. So she says the more a path is used, the more a path is used, right? Because the first person who walks there just was like, I want to go from here to there, I'm going to walk there, and they walk, and that doesn't make a path. But then once you can see a visible path, then you're going to do that instead of circling around, you know, some random other way. You're going to follow the path that's been carved already. It's the easiest thing to do, but it's also taking what's been handed to us. It's reinforcing the idea that here's the path, here's the citation you need, here's the scholar that you should follow, instead of carving your own path. She says here, the more he is cited, the more he's cited, right? So if we think of this Rasa person or whoever I was looking at with the corporal punishment piece, the more someone is cited, the more they're cited, right? So he has 3,000 citations, maybe at 30, he was no big deal, but 31 is like, oh, I gotta cite him because 30 people cited him. And then 32, it's even more pressure to cite him. And now he's got 3,000, so of course you have to cite him, right? No one ever said this was the best. I mean, maybe. It's not the best article that's ever been written, but people just keep citing it, right? Do we know that this works, you know, in social life, right? We don't want to have to make a decision on every little thing. And so, oh, if 3,000 people have cited him, I guess I have to cite him too. Let's see, I'm almost out of time. So just to think critically about who gets cited, why, this vicious cycle of popularity and algorithms, hacking the algorithm, not just because of representation, not just because it's a good thing to find out who are the Black, Indigenous, people of color, and women who are writing in my field. Let me cite them. But it's also, that's where you're going to get better science, better scholarship, better research, is when you're making sure that you're not arbitrarily just following the people who other people have followed. That you're actually identifying who's out there, not just who the algorithm tells you who's there. How to do research, think about doing research in a way that's not the same as buying shoes. I don't want to do research the way I buy shoes. It's a different thing, and it's related to academic integrity. So when we think about academic integrity, a lot of times we think about, how do I, not mess up my citations and not get in trouble for, paraphrasing when I should have quoted, or quoting and when I should have paraphrased, and not putting a citation on it properly. When we are using our academic practice as a form of paying tribute to this community of scholars who've helped shape our thinking, then citation becomes a thank you. Instead of a hoop that you have to jump through, it becomes a way to pay tribute to those who've shaped your thinking. And I just want to pause it and put out there, bibliographies are radical expressions of the world we want to see. So think about your bibliography and your footnotes as a testament of love and gratitude for the thinkers who've shaped your thought and who you are. I encourage you to follow on social media, #CiteBlackWomen, to think about citation as a radical act, to think about who is not being cited when that guy who's being cited 3,000 times keeps getting cited, and start using your citations and your bibliography as a way to correct that imbalance. And be ready to tell your professors why you cited the people that you cited. And then I know I'm out of time, so I'm trying to rush, sorry. Just think about writing the world you want to live in, and making your academic practice mirror your outlook and your ethics of life. Your work is a reflection of who made you. It's a way to say thank you, and it's a way to amplify and pay forward those who have shaped your thinking. So that the people who are getting 3,000 citations are the people who deserve it, right? They're the ones that really deserve it, instead of just the ones that everybody else has always cited, right? So hacking that algorithm so that then Google Scholar is like, oh, I better elevate Chanda Prescott-Weinstein to the top of the list, instead of these other people who have just been cited all along, right? Get the robots to do the right thing. So if you open the PowerPoint with the link, you can get some more links to other, people who are thinking and writing about this. And feel free to use it as you wish, and let me know how it goes. I'm so sorry I hardly left time for discussion here at the end. Any comments or questions? I'm just glancing at the chat now.
While you're looking at the chat, Dr. Galvez, this is so awesome. I think that this is so engaging. I could probably listen to you for like 5 more hours. I mean, and full disclosure, I actually had another meeting to leave this and go to from 10 to 11, and I sent them an email to be like, I'm going late because this was... Before we get to the questions, I just wanted you to share, you talked about a class and that you were going to do, and then how can the students follow up with you on the work that you do?
Yeah, I would love to know, actually, just a straw poll, raise your hand if you would be interested. I was thinking of offering a 1-credit class, just a mini class that would, go into some of this in more practical terms, like a how-to do it. So it looks like one person would be interested, a couple of people. Okay, good. So I'll see if I can do that for the spring. And, it'll be online because everything's online. But we can do it that way, and I'll make it so it's open for master's students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions? We're out of time and probably have to go on to the next presentation.
Yes, I'm interested in the podcast that you mentioned earlier. I just wanted to write down the name.
Yeah,
I started off with Imagine, I believe.
Imagine Otherwise.
Imagine Otherwise. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and just look, she's got 1 million episodes. I would suggest just skim the names and see if any names jump out to you as people you already know. And if not, just like grab one that sound, you know, the title jumps out at you. I mean, she gets deep with every podcast guest and really gets, I was a guest on there, and it was one of my favorite things that I've ever done, because she really kind of gets you to do what we were doing earlier. Like, why do you do what you do, and how does that come out in what you write? And so it's really powerful to listen to people really, you know, doing such a great diversity of work, artists, you know, they're all kind of bridging academia and some other kind of practice, activism or art. So, you know, kind of getting people to talk about why they do what they do is really beautiful.
Thank you.
I know that we are watching the time, Dr. Galvez, but I just want you to know we do have a break 10:30 to 11:45 until the next workshop. So, I mean, I know you must have also a million things to do, but if a few people, if you wanted to ask a question, you can go ahead and ask the question. I am just gonna shoot out and go to my other meeting, but Jonathan is here, and I want to tell you, thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzette. And I saw there were a couple questions in the chat that I can answer now, and anyone is welcome. If you hop off, I won't take it personally. If anyone who needs to hop off, feel free. But I can take a few minutes to answer some more of the questions that came up. It looks like someone asked, and thank you so much, all of you, for being here. Jonah asked, how do you say your name? Sorry, you're muted.
Hey, good morning. It's Jana, like Donna, but with a J.
Okay, great. What is RefWorks? So RefWorks is, if you go to, I can actually just show you because I have the thing open right here. If you go to the Lehman Library website, the A to Z databases. So I'm in just the library website, and you go to A to Z databases, and you go to R, it comes up right there, RefWorks. And what it is it's similar to EndNote, which helps you manage citations. So I really recommend those of you who are new, you know, early in your stage of, not necessarily new to graduate school, but like you haven't yet written your thesis, it's really worth taking a little bit of time to get, I don't know why it's not letting me in. Oh, I have to do this. To get familiar with this, it probably, if you took an hour to watch a tutorial, you would be like incredibly well versed in how to use it. But what it allows you to do is you can just grab citations and send it to your bibliographies. And then once you, let's see if I manage to actually get in. It allows, no, it's probably not gonna let me. It allows you to manage your citations very easily, and you can just spit out bibliographies. So this is like, here are my bibliographies. I don't know if you can see them, but you can see like all of my references here, and I have thousands. I have my entire book, the last book I wrote, all of the references are in here. And basically it just, you can, when you find a reference, you can just send it to your RefWorks. It automatically pops in with all the information attached to it. And then if you want to create a bibliography, you can just click on whatever sources you want to use in your bibliography, create a bibliography, and you just select, you know, I want APA style. And then it'll just spit out a bibliography for you. Now it's like my pop-ups and stuff are causing trouble, but here's like the bibliography now that I just did with those two sources. You can also like just embed it into whatever you're writing. So it makes the whole thing of like memorizing a citation style kind of passe. You don't need to do that anymore, which is really nice.
That's
and
great.
I publish
so much.
Yeah, I publish interdisciplinarily. Like I, often publish in anthro journals, but sometimes I publish in an education journal. I can't learn everybody's citation style. So I just, am able to process my bibliographies automatically. And then, you glance over to make sure it all kind of, the robot did the job properly.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, everybody. Oh, good publishing sites. Michelle, what do you mean for reading or for you publishing?
For publishing.
For you publishing. Okay, so for publishing, like identifying journals, or for publishing like think pieces like blogs and stuff?
No, books, book and articles.
So if you want to publish, I just discovered this new, I can show you this too. This new it's not new, but it's new to me. Jane is a website that it's best for health, but it's not exclusive to health. So it's a journal author name estimator. So if you copy and paste like a 1-paragraph description of what you're trying to write. So let's say I'm trying to write I'm just going to put in keywords instead here because I don't have an abstract, but let's say food, nutrition, health, Bronx, community, diabetes. It will tell you like all the journals that publish on that subject and like how influential they are. This is the same problem we're seeing with the algorithms. You want to be careful about that, but it tells you, is it open access? How is it indexed? It gives you the web page and stuff like that. You can see recent articles that they've published. So it's a great way to identify journals that publish the kind of work that you're doing.
Thank you. Oddly enough, you hit the target of what I'm thinking of.
Are you kidding? We need to talk then. That's what I'm working on too. So feel free to circle back to me. We can talk more.
Thank you so much.
That's so funny. Okay, thanks, John. I will communicate to you all. I know we might be on the same email, but I can definitely ask Suzette to communicate if I am able to get that course to happen for next semester.
I have one last question before you go. I know you mentioned something about academic Twitter or like Instagram. Can you mention that one more time quickly?
Yeah. So getting started can be a little bit tricky depending on what your field of study is. I don't know. I can name for my field who they are. But one way to do it is just, it's the same kind of snowball effect. Once you find out about one, then the algorithm of Twitter will tell you who else to follow. So algorithms can be helpful as much as we want to be aware of what they're doing, when they feed us things. So if you can identify like one person in your field who's kind of probably on the young side, who's actively publishing, of a generation that's using Twitter, and then just Google them, like, their name, Twitter in Google, and it'll tell you if they have a Twitter. Usually academics use their own names on Twitter, so that's helpful. They're not usually using, some are using pseudonyms, but usually you can find them. They're not hiding, they want to be there. So, search for whoever, pick one person who's kind of you think is on the same wavelength as you. Look and see if they have an academic Twitter, follow them, then look at who they follow and who they're retweeting and start following them. And then before long, you'll start seeing this whole universe open up to you.
Thank you so much for repeating that again. I know it could be definitely helpful, like following people on Twitter. Twitter is like a whole nother universe by itself. And that's like a good way to express your views. Also like following them on Instagram and Facebook, like if they do have it as well. So that you could keep up, like know what is it that they're doing regarding academic research and things like that. So thank you.
They'll announce. Someone asked, is it a good way to find out about publications? Almost everybody I know, when they publish something, will announce it on Twitter. And oftentimes authors get like a free link. I mean, we have access to most things for free through the library subscriptions, but even if we sometimes don't, like they'll post, you know, an open access or a PDF of their new article. So you can be the first to get it, to read it. And don't be shy, you know, if they post that they publish something and you can't find it, be like, hey, you know, message them and say, like, I really wanted to read that thing you tweeted about. Can I get a PDF of it? That's catnip to scholars, to be asked to share something you've just written by somebody who's interested in reading it. Like, we love that. Don't be shy to do that. People love, you know, when people are interested in their work. So you can start a conversation with whoever, you know, is out there. It's a very normal, common thing. You won't be seen as a stalker, trust me.
I have a question, if I may. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, hi, Lisa.
Hi, thank you so much. This was so wonderful. And the second time I've heard it, but it's different every time. And I had a question about how we can balance it all, because it seems like there's this extra burden that goes with reaching out and building that one's pantheon, a pantheon that one is in sync with, that students, graduate students who are in sync with the institution as it exists don't have to take on. And it sounds like this is necessary for survival in a way, to find the texts and that have meaning and add meaning to the work one does, so that one's academic work is in sync with one's goals. So that's a big burden. And at the same time, new graduate students are learning the ropes. And they have all the assignments and hoops to jump through in the institution as it exists. So it seems unfair. I just want to say, first of all, for that maybe some students have to negotiate that extra essential task that is sort of like taking the path that is not charted. It's the herd path, right? Like it's figuring out where that path is because it's not on the maps.
Yeah.
So and I love your insight about how that in this era of social media, that there's also great possibility that goes along with that. I mean, I remember as a student at an elite institution trying to figure out the queer authors that I was reading when I was assigned all these authors, and it was the era of close reading, and you're not supposed to ask about the author's biography. And I just remember this overwhelming feeling in the stacks of the library and the endless analyses of poems. It just felt like so frustrating. And
you almost want someone to hand you like a little secret, like handbook, like.
Well, I was trying to figure out and negotiate, and then of course the professors, you know, that I found and adored, but it turned out okay that they were queer too, but I kind of knew and didn't know. So, and that dates me because it was a while ago. But so I identified with the things you were describing. It was like this extra task that was not even written. And I was negotiating it in the assignments, but wasn't sure how, because I wanted to make them mine. So, and I think people might experience that in different ways. So, any suggestions about?
Yeah. So there are two things I'm thinking about when you're saying that, and I think you're absolutely right. It can be an extra burden, but there are two ways. One is to offset some of the burden and to think about not only how are we for each of us individually going to hack the algorithm to find the bibliographies, the scholars, the pantheon that we feel inspires us, but what accountability are we asking of our professors and our peers who may not have the same approach to justify who they're reading, and for our professors who they're assigning, right? So I can't wait for the day. I've put so much energy into decolonizing my syllabus that I can't wait for the day that students are like, can you please tell, you know, I would have like a nerd fainting spell. If a student asked me, why did you choose the things that we're reading on our syllabus? And, who did you kick off the syllabus? Because a lot of people got kicked off my syllabus over the last several years, because I realized I don't need to assign this person just because everybody else assigns them if they're not actually bringing anything to the table. And so ask your professors, if your syllabi look like they haven't been touched since 1995, ask the professor, why are we reading these things? How do you ask them about, you don't have to be confrontational. It's not a power move, but just ask them in genuine curiosity, how do you as a professor keep up with your field of study? It's actually a logistical question too. How do you keep up with all the new things being published, and how do you decide what to put on the syllabus? And ask them to talk through it, and tell you why they're choosing the things that they're choosing. Ask your peers when you're doing in groups together doing group projects, how are you making, or when they're working on their master's proposals also, how are you doing your lit review? How are you choosing who to include and not to include? So that it's more normalized that we don't take these things as received wisdom, but we are all accountable for who we're reading and who we're citing. And that the path of least resistance becomes less comfortable, right? Because it's an uncritical path, right? So intellectually, that's not, you're not doing the work if you're just following the path that's already been carved in the grass. So making that like the less noble intellectual choice in our programs, right, is one thing that we can do to offset some of the labor and create more legitimacy for ourselves, that we're not just making trouble, right? But we're, in it, out of intellectual curiosity, trying to figure out who's not being represented in this canon. And then the other thing that occurs to me is, let's see, oh, it was so clear, and then it slipped. The burden of doing it. Oh, the other thing is that, you describe kind of the secret, guidebook or whatever that, you wish you had, or this, trying to get to places that are not on the map. This is also about self-care, and it's about protection, and it's not just about hacking the algorithm or hacking the bibliography. It's about hacking academia, how to make academia a more comfortable place. So if the place you want to go is a place that exists and it's not on the map is fucking wrong. So how do you make the map correct and refuse to allow incorrect maps to be distributed year after year, right? So it's also about finding people in the academy who are going to be support systems and help you figure out how to negotiate, because let's face it, a lot of times professors will gaslight their students and say, well, why didn't you identify, X really important thinker in our field and put them on your bibliography? And they'll try to make us feel bad. Right? So if we have a community on Twitter, on social media, in our grad programs, hopefully as many communities as we can knit together to back us and support us and say, this is where it's at, right? This old canon is not where it's at anymore. This is where it's at. And I have a community backing me to say that what I'm doing is not because I'm lazy or bad at library searches and refusing to identify the canonical people in my field, is because I'm doing something different and valuable and important. And if you can have your squad, ready to say, yes, that's correct, you're doing it right, wherever they are, they don't have to be sitting next to you in the same classroom. They can be in other institutions, but you can help make that argument for yourself. I think Dora Lee wanted to ask a question.
Hi, good morning, Dr. Galvez. How are you? I have a question in terms of, like, you were talking about like social media and things like that. So I know like LinkedIn is becoming more of a professional kind of social media where people are sharing articles and things like that. So like I follow the APA, right? So sometimes they publish pretty interesting articles. Would that be a place to kind of also as a resource to kind of, and I ask because I know even though it's meant to be a professional social media, some people may not use it for that purpose. I don't know how that's possible, but would that be like a good way to also kind of get like those resources for our articles and for writing and inspiration?
Definitely. And you can follow people and try to connect to people. LinkedIn is a little bit more exclusionary in the sense that some people don't allow you to connect if you're not connected in real life, because it's a little bit like kind of a social network thing where, you know, you might use it like if I say I'm connected to X person and someone asks me, oh, can you give me an introduction to that person? I have to really be connected to them to do that. So a lot of people kind of are very conservative with their LinkedIn connection. So it's not a free for all.
Right. The reason I asked now, because, you know, with COVID, we're networking now more virtually. You know, we have more opportunities online to connect with individuals that we may have not had in person due to schedules and things like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, LinkedIn is great. It's very, it's the most polite and reserved of the social media.
Yeah. Yes.
Professional, where people really put a very curated, very careful kind of self-presentation. And so you will find, if you look for scholars on there, you will find their most recent publications usually. You won't find the arguments and like debates and, you know, like on the spot kind of you know, hot takes on what's happening in the world that you'll find on Twitter. So I like to combine those. LinkedIn I find the least interesting in that regard because I don't get that kind of sense that there are humans there like having arguments.
Right. I asked because
like seeing their resume. But if you're interested about, it's very good in the professional sense, and not only to connect to people, but also to see how people self-present. So if you're like, I know I want to end up doing this and being this kind of, you know, having this kind of role or career, following people who have that endpoint already and seeing how they got there, because you can see it, is very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, because I don't have a Twitter, so I kind of wanted to see what.
Yeah, and you can, by the way, I should have said this out loud. You don't have to tweet to be on Twitter. Like you can be a silent, you know, person on Twitter, have your account but not tweet, and just, you know, follow other people. You know, so if you're like, I don't want to put myself out there, that's okay. You can still get on there and just follow what everybody else is talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Galvez, for presenting. We are going to go on break now until 11:45, where we have a presentation by Dr. Marisol Jimenez with setting up your research. So you can either log off and come back at 11:45, or just mute yourself and turn off your camera and then turn it back on when you return.
Bye, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
See you guys
Thank
back.
you.
What time we come back?
11:45.
Thank you.
Thank you.